Hi, this is Kevin Eastman, co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you're listening to me on the Man Cave Chronicles, and we're having a blast this 35th anniversary of the Turtles month. Woo! Cowabunga, dude!
Welcome to another episode of the Man Cave Chronicles.
Welcome to the party, pal!
You're my boy, Blue!
Yo, Adrian!
A podcast with interviews of amazing guests from the world of pop culture.
Oh, yeah!
TV.
Nice!
Movies.
Oh, I love the movies!
Comedy and more. From deep inside the Man Cave, your host, Elias.
Kevin, welcome to the cave.
So awesome to be here. How are you today?
Good. How are you, my friend?
Fantastic. Busy as a one-armed paper hanger. No, it's just busy as all get out. We're gearing up for the release of issue 1 of Drawing Blood. Plus, it's the Turtles' 35th anniversary this month, and we've been just having a super awesome, wonderful, busy month, busy year so far.
Hey, really quick before we start this interview, I need to know. I know you went to college at UMass, which is like not even 25 minutes away from me. How was it going? How was it going to UMass? And what restaurant did you work to? I'm curious.
Well, it's I took night classes at UMass. Peter Laird was an official graduate of UMass,
Okay.
but he was. But when I moved into the area, a friend I was seeing at the time, she went to UMass, and so I was taking night classes because I was also working full time. I worked at Price Chopper on University Drive.
Okay.
And I worked at Papa Gino's over in the was it the Mountain Farms Mall? Everybody used to call the Dead Mall. So
Yeah. It's still. I think it's still a dead mall.
It's still a dead mall. It's tried so valiantly over the years to come back. And, but a lot of good memories there. So for sure.
So while you were going to school there, how did you come up with the idea for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Well, it's interesting because it was a slow evolution. Mainly when I was in that area, that we call it, generally the Valley, Amherst, Northampton area. That's where I actually met Peter. That was probably the most critical of my experiences there. And I was actually taking a bus from Amherst to Northampton one day because there was a great store in Northampton called Main Street Records, and they had great comic books and art books and albums and CDs, and so I used to go over there, and that was a great haunt of mine. And so on this particular bus trip, I found a magazine. It was a kind of a free fanzine newsprint kind of free giveaway thing called SCAT, S-C-A-T, SCAT. And it was put together by local cartoonists, supported by local advertising. And one of the artists in that particular issue was Peter Laird. But I went over to their offices about 2 weeks later and tried to sell them some of my cartoons and some of my illustrations. And they had said, well, we don't really do that as much as we used to anymore, but you should really meet this guy, Peter Laird, who is a local artist that's into the same nutty stuff you're into, superhero superhero comics, that that genre of stuff. And he lives right here in town in Northampton. So it was Bill Mueller, who runs the Guild Art Center, was the one that made the introduction and gave me Pete's address. And so I wrote Pete a note, and we got together, and that was we started working together almost from the very first meeting, sharing ideas and penciling and inking each other's work and that kind of stuff. So it was a whole definitely a collaboration from meeting number one.
Yeah. How did you decide you wanted to do Turtles and Splinter as a rat?
Well, it was kind of a funny thing that it was just weird natural joke in that my line of thought that particular night back in 1983 was that if Bruce Lee was a martial artist, if Bruce Lee as a martial artist was an animal, what would be the silliest animal he could be? And I was thinking, well, fast-moving martial artist, slow-moving turtle. It just was such a natural joke. It made me laugh, and I did this doodle of a turtle standing upright. He had a mask on and nunchuck strapped to his arms, and I put it on Peter's desk and said, this is going to be the next big thing. Ha ha ha! It's your turtle, and that was the joke that started the ball rolling. And that more sketches evolved, a group shot of all 4 of them, and then we started working on the origin story. And of course, the ever-present mutagen that mutates so many people into superheroes in our comics histories that most of the superhero stories that we were reading, Marvel and DC, they all took place in a version of New York City. So what's most prevalent in New York City is rats, especially down in the sewers. So when the turtles fell down in the sewer with the ooze, they landed in the lap of a rat splinter, and that's where that was developed as part of telling the origin of the turtle.
Yeah. Was there a certain comic that you were a fan of that also gave you the idea?
There was definitely an amalgamation of many, many different kinds of comic books, going back as far as early versions of the X-Men, which were mutated characters. The Hulk, which was mutated Fantastic Four. Every superhero had some sort of mutation aspect or aspect. And one comic in particular to me was I was a big fan of was a DC comic called Commandy, The Last Boy on Earth, which featured a universe of Planet of the Apes-like scenarios where apes were, running the planet and the humans were the animals. So you had this whole culture of mutated animals, lions, tigers, and apes and other creatures. And that sort of combined with my particular fondness for a character named Daredevil. We sort of put everything into a blender and blended it up, and out came the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it definitely was, I would say our love poem to all of the favorite things that we loved about comic books at that time. So
So
bit of everything.
What was your favorite thing about creating the Ninja Turtles, and who was your favorite turtle that you enjoyed?
Well, I guess the best part of the creation of the Turtles was that we were lucky enough to find a fan base early on that liked the characters too, and so by them buying the Turtles allowed us a way to make a living where we were drawing comic books full time, and we could keep coming up with more stories and more adventures and expanding on these creations, which really started as a one shot, just going to be one single issue, beginning, middle, and end. We never thought we'd have a chance to do any more stories, so it really allowed us to develop the characters and the stories and all those things that made the Turtles the Turtles. And then as a favorite, it's hard to narrow it down to a favorite because I feel like they're all of our, for both Peter and I, they're our children.
Yeah.
But I also I look back to, I guess, Michelangelo, the Turtle, the Nunchucks, because he was the first one drawn. So I'd say firstborn. Maybe I'm a little bit more partial to him, but otherwise, I love them all like my children.
So what motivated you that you knew you were going to be able to publish like your own comic?
Well, we were lucky in that around this time in the comic book industry, there had been a number of self-publishers. Actually, it was a culture that had been around since the late 60s, early 70s, with with underground comic books or, this sort of hippie culture, doing these alternative comic books, black and white, mostly self-published. For all these artists that couldn't get work drawing superheroes from Marvel or DC, they still wanted to do other things, but do it in comic book form. In particular, guys like a guy named Dave Sim, who self-published his own book featuring an aardvark that acted like Conan the Barbarian. He started publishing in the mid 70s. There were a number of other self-publishers, a lot of movement in self-publishing in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's what Peter and I gravitated to. We couldn't get work with Marvel and DC either. We just, we weren't the kind of cookie cutter house style that they liked for their superhero books. So, didn't stop us. We wanted to still draw comic books for a living. So we came up with our own characters and then self-published them. So we borrowed some money and from my uncle and started out, with a lot of kind of like a Hail Mary, let's see if this works. If it's not, then we had a great time doing what we loved the most, which was drawing comics.
How much would you say the comic book world has changed from like the 80s when you were growing up to like now?
It's still the heart and soul of it's still the same. It's sequential storytelling, fantastical characters. In situations where certainly I guess the biggest change I'd say were back in those days when I was reading comic books in the late 60s, early 70s, and later even throughout most of the 80s. stories that you would see, say, maybe in an Avengers comic or some more mainstream comic books. You could never imagine them as, seeing that on the big screen. So that made it super special. That made it super fantastic. It's like reading a novel or reading a comic book, because you were, taken to the world of like Lord of the Rings, which you could never imagine that as a movie back in those days, or done well. And now that technology's caught up with all that we now can share that, all those fantastical ideas that once upon a time you could only draw it in, pen and ink and color. Now you can see in full-blown action in your local Cineplex. But mostly the heart and soul is the same. It's great stories, great characters, a great way to do a little bit of escapism and explore fantasy without spending $100 million on a movie. You can let wherever your imagination will take you. That's whatever you can write and draw. That's where you can go with your characters. So yeah.
Speaking of movies, how much were you in the loop when the Ninja Turtle movies came out and the cartoons?
Back in the early days, pretty much everything you saw with Turtles on it, whether it be, besides the comic books, obviously, all the work on all the early cartoon shows, movies, toys, pretty much, I'd say anything that you saw with a turtle on it or in it or part of it from, say, 1987 all the way through till the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, Peter and I had direct involvement. We had final say, final approval. We worked on scripts, plotting, ideas. We had, worked on the movies as far as approval. And, pretty much anything that, had a turtle on it, we were part of it. And that was super, super, super exciting. It was a great time to be, fully in charge of your characters and your creation, because, a lot of the guys that inspired us back in the day, the guys that created Captain America and the Fantastic Four and those kinds of things didn't get to have that kind of ownership and control and say over the characters. So we felt pretty blessed that we were able to have that with our creations.
Yeah. So when you created the Turtles, they were supposed to be like dark and everything, right?
Well, it was definitely written for an older audience, but it was written for Peter and I, which I think I would say the level of intensity in our comics were probably PG-13 maybe at the most. It was violent but not too violent. You can see heads being lopped off and blood spraying across all the panels and eyeballs flying around. We did them with enough edge, kind of more of an edgy, swashbuckling kind of adventure. So it was intended for all the audience, but we didn't go crazy.
Yeah. Do you think we're going to see? Do you think someday we're going to see like an adult-oriented Turtles movie where it's dark, or even a cartoon that's dark?
Well, what's interesting is we call it the 2000 series, when the Turtles were on Fox Kids, Fox Saban. It was definitely an older, edgier version of the Turtles, and actually a movie that was a cartoon, an animated movie that was just released about 2 weeks ago is a Batman Turtles crossover movie, which is definitely intended for more of an older audience. So it's a PG-13. But will we ever see a John Wick style Turtles movie? I don't know. Raid Redemption meets John Wick meets who knows
that would
the
be great.
It'd be. I think it's the original audience is certainly old enough and would be into that, and I think its time has come. But we'll see if Hollywood will take us there.
Yeah. So tell us about Drawing Blood. How did you get the idea for that?
Drawing Blood's kind of a two-part answer in that two-part creation, in that I love that some of my own experiences in comic books, whether it be publishing, self-publishing, working in Hollywood and animation, there were so many different interesting and bizarre and crazy sort of aspects and antics that went into that that business and what was going on in those different kinds of businesses, or those kind of universes that a lot of people don't get to experience. And then I love the rise to success, too much money too soon, which, you'd see, the equivalent of maybe it's a sports star that, gets signed to a $50 million a year contract, or a rock star that has a huge a huge success and makes a lot of money early on. His name was, prevalent in my experience is that Peter and I made a bunch of money early on, and we both, I certainly made a lot more mistakes with doing crazy rock star type of things. And so it was sort of when you're in the middle of all that, you forget whether, if you're a sports star, comic book artist, or musician, what got you there was the creativity. And sometimes all the distractions of success and money and all that stuff takes you away from what made you, want to be that person anyway. So it's sort of a study of a character that's completely fictional, kind of a true story. We call it completely fictional, true story of a guy that created these characters called the Radically Rearranged Ronin Ragdolls, had some success and hasn't drawn in 10 years and is now looking for his way home, so to speak. His creativity has lost mojo amongst the very crazy sort of set of circumstances and characters that surround him. So it's a little Spinal Tap. Remember the movie, the heavy metal movie? So it's kind of like a Spinal Tap meets Breaking Bad meets, Amadeus as a film. It's just so it's a fun experiment to take a character through some interesting steps and paces and try some cool things.
Are some of those stories based on your journey?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'd say probably 30% maybe, 30-40%. But what's fascinating is I've been in the business for 35 years, and over those years, I've met lots of different guys from, you say, Neil Gaiman to Alan Moore to Frank Miller to so many other people that have, followed similar paths. Some of my favorite stories that these guys would tell would be, say in the bar at the after Comic-Con, would all be in the bar at the hotel or something, telling war stories and swapping horror stories, or telling about, crazy adventures of we've had in Hollywood or publishing or whatever. And so I took a lot of those notes, and I started keeping this kind of sketchbook diary of anecdotes and for instances and sort of tall tales from different people, and sort of mishmash all of that into one idea. So yeah, I would say about 30% me and about 70% lots of other people.
Okay. So now you mentioned, we're coming up to the 30-year anniversary of the Ninja Turtles, and we're also doing issue 100. Tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. The Turtles turn officially 35.
35.
May 5th. I don't mind going back in 5 years. I'd be 5 years younger. May 5th, 1984 was the premiere of the first issue of the Turtles. So May 5th of this year was the 35th anniversary. And what's been so fantastic is I started working with the incredible Tom Waltz and Bobby Turnow and so many fantastic artists at IDW back in 2011. And, thanks to the support of so many incredible fans, we are, I think, issue 93 just hit comic stores. But we have the storyline that takes us out through issue 100, which comes out in November, is beyond intense, beyond cool, beyond. It's sort of one of those. I tell fans to, if you've been reading it, buckle up, put your seatbelts on, and hold on tight, because it's going to get crazy. Right up until issue 100 is going to be a double sized issue, and it's kind of our tribute to the original Mirage series called City at War. So we're really we're going all out on this one. So it's pretty awesome.
How fun is it at designing the IDW covers?
It's probably the greatest artistic joy in my life, in that because I get to work with I can't say enough about Tom Waltz, who's the head writer of the series. We all help write, in that we help plot and come up with ideas and sort of generally direct it. But Tom does all the heavy lifting. He does all the writing. He's written all 100 issues, and he's just a brilliant storyteller, brilliant writer. And what evolves out of those is just these wonderful ideas that are brought to life by these, and I call them kids, because a lot of these guys that are working on the Turtle comics these days are half my age. They draw better than I do, and they love Turtles. So they give me inspiration. They really, I got to show them that the old man can still do it from time to time. But I do. I love the creativity. I love the energy I get from the series, and so designing the covers is an absolute blast, hands down.
do you enjoy doing the Comic Cons and meeting the fans? Even like I'm 42 years old, so I grew up watching the Turtles, and like I can't wait for my son to get older, just for him to experience what I experienced when I was a kid.
Hands down, my favorite aspect of my business is that, getting a chance to go out there and meet fans, because, I joke with them, but I'm not really joking. I say that, if I wasn't sitting here with you, you guys are lined up and I'm sitting here and I'm excited to meet you. If I wasn't sitting here, I'd be out running around the comic convention like you guys are having a great time. I do love, the atmosphere. I love, comics. I love all the genres, and I love, part of being in that community. But at the same time, it's like, much like I mentioned, the artists that I get to work with on the series, the kind of jobs that we do also, it's pretty solitary in that it's, it's not a team sport. We basically, we're at home drawing, working, getting up early and staying up late, trying to finish an issue, and it's sort of a solo activity. So you sometimes don't realize you lose, you don't realize the people that you're affecting and the people that are buying those stories until you actually get out there and meet them. And, they get excited about the latest story development or the latest story arc, and that gets you even more excited. And so it's quite a natural high in that sense. It's a wonderful thing.
Lastly, how can the listeners find you on social media?
Definitely go to KevinEastmanStudios.com. It's my personal website, and it's we call it a fan site because there's different aspects to it. There's levels where you can go in and see stuff for hardcore fan club members only, but you don't need to go don't have to go there to go onto the site and find out what's the latest development in all things Turtles, what's going on with me for shows, conventions, signings, events. We sell all kinds of hats and prints and products, but pretty much, all things Kevin Eastman, the Kevin Eastman's adventures are, you can find at KevinEastmanStudios.com. And, we do the Instagram and the Twitter and the Facebook stuff, which you can also find us, in all those places. But yeah, I would say the fan site is the number one place for all the latest and the greatest. And, we're doing something crazy and new up there pretty much every day.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, this was fun, Kevin. Thanks for coming on.
No, dude, it was a blast. I love doing this stuff, and thanks for you hanging out with us with our 35th anniversary month. So this is beautiful.
Beautiful.
Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power. They're the world's most fearsome fighting team. We really hit the turtle. Heroes in the half shell, and they're green. When the evil shredder attacks, these turtle boys don't cut no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Splinter taught them to be ninja teens. So I go right. Leonardo meets Donatello does machines. Rap is cool but rude. Michelangelo is a party dude. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Heroes in a half shell. Turtle power.